Thank you very much, Darren. It's very good to be here, especially after hand how AI is supporting human judgment to make better use of limited time and resources, which matters hugely for public services across our country. Recently, I visited the Ontario Court of Justice in Toronto. It's a large, modern building, fully paperless, with judge-only trials handing down quick and fair justice for summary and some more serious offences. And above all, it works. And walking through the courthouse, I had the uncomfortable realization. It felt less like a visitor, if you like, from another country, though I was, and more like one from another time, catching a glimpse of what could be a vision of justice designed for the world as it is, not as it was. It can help us smash through delays, cut complexity, and free up people to do what they do best. We're of course already using including through Microsoft's AI Assistant Copilot. And last year we piloted an AI tool in the probation service, Justice Transcribe. It records meetings between officers and offenders, removing the need for handwritten notes to be typed up later, so staff can concentrate on turning offenders' lives around. That's what they want to do, and the results have been transformational. Over 150,000 meetings transcribed and more than 25 saved. We're testing transcription in the courts and tribunals based on the same technology. And in the Immigration and Asylum Chamber, some judges are using it to help formulate notes and write remarks. We're also piloting AI for legal advisors and district judges in the Magistrates' Court to speed up case progression by and summarising their judgments. AI initiatives like these. So we're going to invest more in our in-house Justice AI unit, a specialist team within my over £12 billion in additional funding in the next financial year will expand our AI capabilities, putting this. But we're going to go even further, strengthening our relationship with Microsoft and others, piloting the solutions of UK-based startups, harnessing industry's top talent to work more closely with us, and launching a Justice AI Academy and fellowship and AI engineers, creating an unprecedented partnership between the public and private sectors on which we can revolutionise a justice system in desperate need. We face an uncomfortable truth. The world has changed and the justice system has not. Crime today is different in scale and complexity. Police are making more arrests, up 10% since 2019. A single case now involves tens of thousands of messages, images, and hours of video requiring review in court. Parliament over the last years is putting more law. 97, including, of course, for sexual crimes, reflecting the fact that as a society we now rightly recognise that these are serious offences which must be confronted. Serious violence and serious sexual offences are all reported at higher levels. Criminal networks are more technologically sophisticated than ever before. I saw this close up when I was Foreign Secretary. They're more organised than ever before. The National Crime Agency estimates that almost 60,000 people in the UK are involved in organised crime. The results of all longer. Trials are more complex than before. Sadly, defendants are not produced on time too often. Lawyers are tied up in trials that then overrun. Delays have become normalised, and at the same time, sentence lengths have risen sharply. Prisons now hold far more offenders than they were designed to, stretching staff, safety and rehabilitation to its limits. Too little has been done to rise to these challenges and to reform the justice system, and that is what we now have to do. The process now requires intention and leadership. 14 years of Conservative governments lacked the basic sense of public duty to act. Officials, of course, would have shown ministers the doom graphs of prisons on the point of exploding. They would have told them the consequences of inaction. Police unable to make arrests, courts unable to send criminals to prison, a total breakdown of law and order. Dame Anne Owens looked at this in her independent prison capacity review, which laid bare how close they came to that disaster. Just days before the collapse of the criminal justice system, but sadly, they kept on increasing sentences while failing to build the prison places needed to lock people away. Just 500 extra places were added in 14 years. Officials would also have showed them the graphs on our courts too. The average victim today waits over 250 days to see justice done. For rape cases, it's a staggering 423 days. These are not abstract statistics. They mean lives on hold. They mean jobs postponed, relationships strained, trauma prolonged. This is a failure to uphold the basic promise of our justice. But the previous governments ignored the warnings again. Plan for change. In that period, they closed 40% of our court buildings, much of which took place under that failed project of austerity. And we think about austerity in the National Health Service, education, worse, much of this hidden from the public. So we inherited a justice system on the point of collapse in every arena, and it fails to us to fix it, to reform the justice system so it can react, founded on the progressive principles that have underpinned Britain's criminal justice system for centuries, but shaped with the realism of recognising that this era requires new structures to produce justice that is swift and is fair. Money, so that we have the resources, and the justice system has the resources it needs to function properly. Third, reforming so that it's able to deliver faster, fairer justice for the public. And third, modernising so that it's more efficient at producing the outcomes that victims deserve. And let me thank hugely Sir Brian Levison for giving me that template that I'm sharing with you today, and all the work that he put in over this last period to get us to this point. So first, funding is the starting point. And this government has shown that we are prepared to invest. We're building 14,000 new prison. We've already delivered 2,900 places since taking office, including new places are under construction. $700 million of additional investment by 2028. Funding almost $150 million for the next financial year, improving the resilience and the condition of the court estate, including making advances in technology, including opening a flagship criminal and court package on records so victims get the help that they need to rebuild their lives. And today, in the Crown Court next year, this will be the highest number cases, as we estimate the system can deliver, backed up by funding to recruit and train more magistrates to meet the demand, and a national campaign to boost the ranks of our magistracy, increasing its size to 21,000 by 2020. Courts to get through more work than ever before, and of course it means that which includes $287 million for the fabric of the estate itself, delivering more vital repairs and digital upgrades. I confirm that we've reached an unprecedented multi-year funding settlement, which will for the first time give the courts the long-term stability of our justice system, and I'm very proud to be the Secretary of State delivering this transformation. And as we move into reform and modernisation, I'm clear that each part of the system deserves the requisite attention over the coming months. I will set out more detail in each area, but today I want to focus specifically. The challenge could not be starker. In 2019, there were around 38,000 Crown Court cases waiting to be heard. Today, that number has skyrocketed to almost 80,000 cases. And even with investment, and the investment that I've announced today, sadly, it would rise to 116,000. Behind the figures are real people. People like Katie. He was later charged with a number of offences, including actual bodily harm and rape. But Katie then faced an agonising wait for justice. Her world collapsed, she became increasingly isolated, her mental health declined, and she lost her job. It wasn't until October 2024 that her partner was found guilty of 3 charges. That was a staggering 7-year wait for justice. We cannot allow victims' lives to be left in limbo like this, and we must recognise that justice delayed is justice denied. These interminable waits mean too many victims pull out of the justice process, understandably prioritising their own well-being and mental health over getting the justice that they deserve. That leaves offenders unpunished, unleashed to offend again, creating yet more victims. So it's a sort of vicious cycle. Historically, the system has focused on defendants on the one hand and prosecutors on the other, often over the expense of the victims themselves. The previous Labour government did a huge amount of work to try and rebalance this. The Victims Commissioner as a voice of victims, a victims code to heighten awareness of victims' rights. And since taking office again in 2024, we've put victims first. We've committed over £500 million to victim services, blocking police from routinely accessing the private therapy notes in all but exceptional cases, in those cases of sexual violence, strengthening the rules on when a victim's sexual history can be raised in court so fewer victims feel like their own credibility is on trial, and making victim liaison officers available to support victims whilst they wait to get to court. But faced with a record and rising backlog in the Crown Court, we must as a whole and make sure that they get the swift justice that should be the promise of our system. With the independent review of the criminal courts that Sir Brian led, and when I set out my intention to act on Sir Brian Levison's review, I was clear about what was needed. More cases staying in the Magistrates' Court, a new swift bench division of the Crown Court for cases with a likely sentence of up to 3 years, where judges alone will determine the verdict. A change, the review predicts, will reduce the times by at least 20%, and which Sir Brian believes will be actually much higher. This will not diminish the role of juries. They will remain and must remain the cornerstone of our justice system. But as I have already set out, justice now takes longer than ever before. And as Sir Brian makes clear, jury trials now take twice as long as they did 25 years ago. And we should remember that since Magna Carta, no part of our justice system has stood still. Governments of all stripes have adjusted where cases are heard to meet the needs of the time. The Crown Court, as we know it today, was only created the year changed the threshold of crimes including taking a motor vehicle without authority and raising the threshold for criminal damage so that they'd no longer changes that threshold for juries. It does not change the fundamental right to a fair trial, which remains absolute. But there's no automatic right to a trial by jury. And in the current system, only 3%, in fact, of criminal cases currently go before a jury. The vast majority of cases are already heard fairly by magistrates without a jury. And following our changes, around 3/4 of trials in the Crown Court will still be heard by a jury, including the majority of youth cases serious enough to go to the Crown. And I will publish a bill to put these reforms into action. Change won't happen, of course, overnight, but here's the reality. If we do nothing at all, the Crown Court backlog will rise to around 200,000 cases by 2035. With the investment that I've announced, it comes down roughly to 174,000. If we reform, it falls to about 87,000. And if we make the courts more efficient, we can really bear down on the caseload. And doing all three of these is how we turn the corner on the rising Crown Court backlog, which is my aim by the end of this Parliament, so that we can restore faith in a justice system that delivers for the people that it serves. As the author of the Lammy Review, which I was asked to do by David Cameron, who was then Prime Minister, our justice system. If justice is to command confidence, it must be transparent as well as timely. So we're working with the judiciary towards greater openness and transparency through the Sentencing Act, and we've already taken a major first step. In the Crown Court, victims will be able to request of the judge's explanation of how and why the sentence was reached without having to attend open court. But I'm clear that this is only the beginning of this journey that we're on. Creating accurate transcripts is time-consuming and costly, so I want to explore how we can use technology to make it quicker and cheaper, to cut costs of victims more broadly and prevent them having to wait lengthy periods to understand the judgment. Judges in the new Swift courts will also explain their verdicts in putting the decision process remarks has shone a light to build on this success. So I'm working closely with the Lady Chief Justice to agree where we can go further in the pursuit of swift, fair and modernisation. How we bring our centuries-old system into the here and now to save review of the criminal courts focused on efficiency. Sir Brian Levison is examined with his characteristic attention to detail case will be heard, which judge will hear it, how long it should take, where it will be heard. When listing works well, cases move smoothly. When it doesn't, there are delays or cases get cancelled, wasting time, causing stress for everyone involved. In some parts of the country, they use a process called blitz courts, where similar cases are listed together over short periods to concentrate the court resources. They support timely decision-making by all parties, including making sure that where a defendant intends to enter a guilty plea, it comes earlier. At the discretion of judges, this approach is used regularly across the country. It's one that Sir Brian endorses and the government agrees. So we'll enable more blitz courts. Unlimited sitting days will be key to delivering them. Beginning in April 2026, blitz courts in London will focus on cases involving assaults on emergency workers, of which sadly there were over 2,000 prosecutions last year in the capital alone. And then the judiciary will consider other offences, such as possession of drugs and commercial burglary, to clear older cases sitting in the system and make sure victims get the justice that they need. Sir Brian also recognises the need for greater consistency in listing, which as things stand is done differently across the country, creating inconsistencies. The responsibility for this process, rightly of course, sits with the judiciary, but the government has a responsibility to support them in that endeavour, fulfilling Sir Brian's recommendation. So today I can announce that the Lady Chief Justice will publish a new national listing framework. This unprecedented move will clarify the listing process, setting consistent principles for how cases are listed for the very first time and ending what many victims justifiably view as a postcode lottery. This will ensure that no matter where they are in the country, victims can expect their cases to be listed in similar ways. And the most serious cases, such as rape, sexual offences, will be treated with the consistency and the urgency that they deserve to get the swift. Looked at how we can use technology. Too many courts function are frankly still carried out using very basic tools, mainly paper and pen. While this isn't quite the legal system described in Dickens' Jaundice either, too much paperwork and a procedural inertia and 21st century. So I can confirm today that we will pilot a new AI listing assistant for judges. JI will process all the information and data available to intuitive listing decisions, to flag cases that may need, to estimate time needed for each case to help efficient scheduling, and to identify opportunities to list additional cases. It's based on technology already being used in the National Health Service to speed up processes and cut waiting times. If the pilot's successful, we will begin a national rollout as soon as possible to take us from local listing process, one that delivers swifter justice for victims. Sir Brian will also reflected on and considered the use of online court proceedings. How a hearing is conducted is rightly a matter for the judiciary, but our job is to make sure that they have the tools to deliver justice as swiftly and as accessibly as possible. While Sir Brian recommends maintaining the presumption for in-person trials, we believe more hearings should be undertaken remotely. The government agrees, and that's why we're investing in reliable, high-quality technology for our courts and tribunals. There will be more video hearings in the Crown and Magistrates' courts than ever before, saving time and making the system more flexible so that it can get through more cases more quickly and deliver swifter outcomes for victims. More remote hearings would also help to alleviate pressure on the prisoner and escort custody services, so-called PECs. This does a very important job, but late arrivals at court can cause chaos. Is frankly basic, and there's an onus on everyone, police, prisons and courts and PECs, to make sure that we do this. Our recently passed Sentencing Act will help ease this problem, because less crowded prisons will make the process easier for everyone involved. But we've got to go further, which is why, as Sir Brian recommends, we'll improve how we communicate and share data to make sure we have the right resources in the right place at the right time, and we'll establish a new oversight body chaired by ministers to monitor PECs more closely so that we can act where the service isn't meeting expectations. But we're going to go even further still to make sure that prisoner escort vans get where they need to be as quickly as possible. We will build on schemes in Manchester, in Bristol, in Salford and Nottingham, allowing prisoner vans to fast-track getting offenders to court by using bus lanes to avoid the traffic. And we're working with the Department for Transport, for which we're grateful, on ways to highlight to local authorities the powers that they already have to allow PEC vans to use bus lanes. And in London, where obviously traffic regularly holds up trials, I can today announce that we've agreed with Transport for London to run a pilot on key routes in the capital. I discussed this with the Mayor of London yesterday. We will trial a number of innovative approaches, including PEC's vehicles being able to use the same technology that switches traffic lights green as emergency vehicles approach, so that they can get through traffic more quickly. And we will continue working with TfL to ensure prisoner transport is as efficient as possible across the capital, cutting journey times and boosting reliability so that victims aren't left waiting around for justice. Finally, when cases make their way through the system, Sir Brian recommends the great. These are specialist staff focusing solely on progressing cases with delegated powers to manage tasks that would otherwise sit with the judges, granting extensions, approving live video links, appointing advocates to cross-examine, just as nurse practitioners free up doctors in practices to focus on complex clinical decisions. These case coordinators ensure the procedural groundwork is done properly, so judicial time is reserved for what only a judge can do, exercise judgment. Already piloted in a small number of courts, these officers, known as case coordinators, have shown really promising results. So we will expand them to all Crown Court centres to keep cases moving and make sure victims get swifter justice. Alongside the changes to the criminal justice system, we're also modernising the civil courts, investing over 50 million to continue digitising the county court, more than 20 million for a new digital system in the High Court, and to meet the needs of our world-leading business and property courts to support the UK's 8.9 billion legal service trade surplus. And this isn't just about big business, it's about practical outcomes for the public too. Over 1 million claims have now been issued in our digital services for making money claims and damages claims. Cases consistently progress 3 times quicker through their early stages with these user-focused services, and we're working closely with the judiciary to develop new rules so online systems are simple to use, accessible and fair. We're also looking at how digital tools can open up access for those who might otherwise be shut out, helping people understand their rights, setting out their issues clearly, crucially without having to set foot in a courtroom, and reducing the stress that often comes from navigating the system. Law tech is central to all of this. We can be proud that the UK is leading the charge. 44% of European law tech startups are based here in the UK. In 2019, we had around 110 law tech ventures. Today, that's more than trebled, and we've got no intention of slowing down. We're making sure that the conditions are right for law tech to thrive, because from digital tools that reduce administration to AI-assisted case analysis to help legal teams identify key issues more quickly, it's enabling lawyers to do more work at their best, applying their judgment, weighing up the facts and delivering fair outcomes. That's why today I'm announcing continued funding of 1.5 million a year for the next 3 years to support the sector to expand even further and make sure the UK continues to be at the frontier of law tech. When I started my speech, I talked about walking into a courthouse in Canada and feeling like a time traveller, as though I'd stepped into a different era of justice with a system that works for the people who use it, victims in our country who faced unacceptable waits for justice. The court backlog has clearly become far too large and delays have become far too long. Today we are calling time on that system and consigning it to the past. From our huge investment in our courts, bigger than ever before, to our comprehensive reform programme, the biggest since 1971, our plans to use technology to turbocharge how justice is done, and I'm glad that the Ministry of Justice is leading the way across government. We will renew the system after years of decline so that it's serious about justice as it exists today, and once again we're able to deliver the swifter outcomes that victims should be able to expect and have always deserved. Thank you very, very much indeed. Very happy to take questions. Might say who you are.
A suspected rapist awaiting trial has been mistakenly set free from prison and has fled the country. How on earth did this happen? What's happened to those extra checks you promised to try and prevent this kind of thing from happening? And what are you doing to bring him back to the UK? Thank you.
This was brought to my attention a few days ago. The police are working at pace to ensure that he returns to the country. As you know, I did set in place checks both in prison and in courts. This is an error in the courts system, and Dame Lynn Owens is about to report shortly so that we can deal with the system we inherited. Under the last system, 860 prisoners were released in error. It is because of the prison capacity crisis that I outlined in my system and very junior staff who are dealing with these issues. We've got to bear down. This is unacceptable, not just to the public, but most importantly, the victims of crime who go through extra stress when these errors occur, largely because we've got a paper-based system. We've got to move into a digital age, which is what I've outlined in the court system, which will alleviate those pressures over time. Thank you for the question.
Hi, Sophie Huskisson from the Mirror. So we saw some MOJ modelling that shows your reforms will start to make a difference on the backlog in 2028. Do you have any fears that another political party, such as Nigel Farage's Reform UK, could come in after a general election in 2029 and undo everything that you've implemented? Thank you.
These reforms, which I've outlined and which Sir Brian and his team reflected on with such deliberation, make it absolutely clear there is no silver bullet. If we want to see those graphs falling, we have to put money into the system, which we're doing. We have to have the modernisation and deal with the inefficiencies, which we're doing, but we've also got to ensure that we've got reform, frankly, because of the huge demand that's now in the system. We've got to do all of it. And if we step back from any one of those things, we will see that backlog continue to rise to over 200,000 cases. My determination is to see that come down by the next general election and the end of this Parliament, and then to see it reduce to much more acceptable levels as we get into the next election cycle up to 2035. And I would encourage all colleagues to look closely at the bill when it's published, and to look closely at both the equality assessments that go alongside that bill, to look at the data and to understand the seriousness of this challenge, and why, if we are serious about centering victims of crime, particularly vulnerable victims of crime, that we have to now press forward with all of these measures as a package, as we've been asked to do by Sir Brian and his team.
Hi there, Amy Gibbons here from The Telegraph. Thanks very much. David, your Victims Commissioner has just told me that Labour MPs who try and block the jury trial reforms will be putting the public at risk unless they come up with an alternative plan. Do you agree with that? And one MP in particular has threatened to resign and trigger a by-election if you push ahead with this. Do you think that's a price worth paying for these reforms?
Well, look, I recognise that there are some who are very focused on the element of these reforms that are about a threshold change, particularly for juries. But I do emphasise it's a threshold change, that 90% of cases in our countries are tried by magistrates. And I do just say that I do think it's acceptable for any government of the day to make the determination as where the threshold should be, just as Margaret Thatcher did back in the late should sit. Should it sit in the magistrates' court or should it sit in the Crown Court? And I think most of the public would accept that if you stole an iPhone on your way out of this building from Curry's, or perhaps from a Microsoft store, that can be dealt with by a single judge. You don't need a trial that goes on for several days. That's the efficiency, that's the reform, that's what the new Crown Court Bench division will bring. And I hope that all MPs will now reflect on the detail and recognise that this is a package that we must do if we're going to stand up and support victims and see that backlog come down. Who's next?
On that same point, Lord Chancellor, we have legislated so that summary trials must go, summary offences must go to A, indictable offences must go to B, and yet and the indictable ones are very serious, and there's no choice for a person charged with murder to go anywhere else but where legislation sends it. And in the middle is a sort of low to moderate level of offending where someone can choose. Normal behaviour, obviously, is you choose the place that's likelier to acquit you. But is it anything more, really, than a sort of punt on the wheel of fortune? Because there has never been any research that shows that jury is fairer. And if that is his choice, then it costs 7 times, according to the CPS, more money for the taxpayer to try the same offence in the Crown Court. It pushes back the resolution for his victim many years instead of months. And of course, it pushes back another list of victims who are going to follow him to the Crown Court, but on really serious cases that they can't get out of the Crown Court about: rape, murder. So we have 2 sets of victims pushed back by this choice, which really is only a punt, isn't it, at who will be fairer. There is nowhere else, apart, I believe, from the island of Jersey, that currently allows this kind of election. Isn't it time we just legislated? If it's this kind of case, you go there. It's the ones at the bottom, you go there. And in the middle, we legislate too. You go to a clear part of the Crown Court, as Leveson proposes.
Well, thank you very much for the question, and it goes to the heart of the problem. If we did nothing and we just continued to see this trend up to 200,000 as we headed into the 2030s, or indeed as we did a little bit of it and didn't see substantial change, what continues is trials lasting longer And obviously, you will get defendants who know that they can plead guilty at the very last stage because victims fall out, witnesses forget, the case collapses. And at the moment, as Sir Brian demonstrated, the rate of cases collapsing is intolerable. We've got to do something about it. And for that reason, the ability for the defendant to elect where they're going has got to come to an end. And so we are introducing more powers for the judiciary to make the right determination. It's actually determination that Crown Courts make in terms of what should be appealed or go up to the Court of Appeal, a proper permission stage that properly assesses, everyone can see it, and understand why something has been granted appeal or where it should appropriately sit. But I maintain that where that threshold falls and where magistrates can do more, up to 18 months, 2 years, what the new Crown Court Bench Division can do up to 3 years, will be speedier and quicker by definition because you're not convening a jury. That's what I saw in Canada. Now, our estimation is the same as Brian's, about 20% their system sees much quicker throughput as the system begins to bed in. All of that ensuring that the victim in more serious cases, murder, manslaughter, rape, sexual violence, has a speedier experience of the system, remembering that back in 1971, and Sir Brian showed me the figures on this, often defendants are waiting 6 months for their child to come on. Well, that experience is a long, long way from where we are today, and our ambition should be to get back to the system as it was created.
Thank you. Carl Dinnan from will result in savings down the line, or do we and the Treasury simply have to get used to a well-funded court system costing more? And different subject, did you, as reported, advise the Prime Minister not to hire Peter Mandelson?
Well, on the first point, more sitting gaze in our courts. That's why I've uncapped them. And I'm pleased. It became very normal in our system for education and health secretaries to announce more investment, far rarer for justice secretaries to announce more investment. So I am the first for a very long time to announce more investment in our courts, and that trend has got to continue if we're serious about bearing down on this problem and seeing that backlog come down. The Prime Minister has apologised for the appointment of Peter Mandelson. His former Chief of Staff has stood down and taken responsibility for that appointment. As Foreign Secretary at the time, of course, I was subject to collective responsibility, and I am sorry that that decision was made.
Good afternoon. My name's Katie Kempen. I'm Chief Executive of Victim Support. We give information and support to hundreds of thousands of victims each year. I'm asking a question on behalf of the Victims Commissioner. She shares many of our concerns. She recently asked victims, knowing what they know now, would they report a crime again? Every single victim she spoke to said no, and that also reflects much of our experience. So please, can you give reassurances on two things? First, that your reforms will genuinely cut the court backlog and end the years-long wait for justice. And second, that you will reform a system that victims say is re-traumatising them and stacked against them.
Well, thank you for the question, and